Welcome back, AgriScience. Today we are going to start looking at plant science, and we're specifically going to be looking at some plant science careers, and we're also going to be looking at some tools that we use in plant science. I know I usually save the tools until the end, but I want you to be familiar with some of them before we actually go into the greenhouse. And so you'll have this week you will have one page that's about plant science careers, and then you'll have one page that's about plant science tools. We will be spending probably the next 3 weeks working on plant science, and so you'll have an opportunity to get out into the greenhouse as well. So before I actually get into the careers themselves, I'll tell you a little bit about what I had going on whenever I was your age and a little bit older. I've already told you the story that whenever I was in ninth grade, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to go to Duke. I accidentally got put into an ag class, and then I loved animals, and so that's kind of the area that I got pushed into, was going and being a vet. However, that's not where I ended up. I ended up switching over to ag education, but I was still a animal science minor, and so I was still taking animal science courses, even though I was kind of feeling like my roots and roots plant science, where I literally grew up, was working with plants. I grew up on a crop farm, so this is a little bit different than the actual type of plant science that we're going to be talking about. Whenever I talk about growing up on a crop farm, I'm really talking about what we call agronomy, which is the growth of regular crops, wheat, corn, soybeans, things like that. We're going to talk about different types of plant science, but I actually switched minors at that point and started minoring in horticulture, and it was kind of more of a home for me. So my actual minor, my major is ag education, my minor is horticulture. So I learned a lot about plants while I was in college, and I guess you could say I actually went into a plant science career since I'm teaching about it now. But the major plant science industries, we're going to look at some different areas of horticulture. Ornamental horticulture, which is kind of hard to say, is the science and art of producing, processing, marketing, and distributing plants grown for their beauty. We're talking about flowers, trees, shrubs, things that you normally are going to see growing in a greenhouse, things that make flower beds look pretty, things that make yards look pretty, interior plants. And so whenever we're looking at ornamental horticulture, we're looking at things that we're typically going to grow or raise to be pretty, whether that's an indoor or an outdoor type of environment. And you can see the picture here of the greenhouse. It looks like they're doing some greenhouse research here. Whenever I was minoring in horticulture, I spent a tremendous amount of time in a research greenhouse, and I literally had to take courses where if my plants died, I failed the course. So it is something that you do have to learn, and it's a challenge. And you learn to have a green thumb, whether you actually have one or not. So, ornamental horticulture is kind of where I majored, or where my major area of study, as far as what I was doing in college, as far as agricultural studies, would be ornamental horticulture, and spend a lot of time in a greenhouse. Fruit and vegetable production, you've got fruit production is pomology, actually, and vegetable production is actually called olericulture. And so with fruit and vegetable production, you are looking at the process of growing and marketing vegetable and fruit crops. And this right here, you can see in this greenhouse, this looks like maybe they've got some either greenhouse or hydroponic. It's hard to see the bottom part of the plants. Tomatoes, that's what it looks like they're growing in there. But this is not necessarily just talking about things that are grown in the greenhouse. These are talking about things that are grown in an orchard or a garden, or something like that. So, blueberries, especially prevalent in the eastern part of the state around Bladen County. They just have a really, really good soil for growing blueberries, and that's down near the North Carolina FFA Center at White Lake. Apples, a lot of our apples are grown in Henderson County. I remember we had an opportunity back in September to go up to Costin Farms, which is one of the local apple orchards and get some apples. Then there's a tremendous amount of apple growth in that particular area. Peaches, South Carolina. We talk about Georgia peaches, but South Carolina is actually probably more productive as far as peaches than Georgia actually is, and so a lot of that is actually grown in our area down around Gaffney. Strawberries, lots of strawberries grown in our state. Tremendous amount. You've got Strawberry Hill down the road. Tomatoes, cucumbers, sweet corn, squash, all can be grown in local gardens. And North Carolina is actually number one in sweet potatoes. And so this major industry for our state is producing fruits and vegetables. Agronomy is where I grew up. I grew up on a farm in eastern North Carolina. We had tobacco, corn, soybeans, and wheat. And so with agronomy, you're looking at the science of soil management and field crops. And so you're looking at growing things that are typically going to be processed into something else. Normally, these field crops are going to be harvested, and the wheat is going to be processed into flour. The corn is going to be processed into cornmeal, corn syrup, even ethanol. Soybeans are going to be processed into many, many other things. Cotton is going to be processed into clothing. And so, with agronomy, we are specifically looking at things like field crops. We are going to skip this slide for right now. We're going to keep on looking at some careers. You will do a career assignment, but I want to go ahead and skip past that, and you'll come back to the career assignment in just a little bit. Some examples of ornamental horticultural careers. The florist. These people are going to design and arrange cut flowers. They're typically not going to grow them. They're normally going to get them from a supplier that grows stem type flowers in a greenhouse, and then they will be shipped out to florists who will then arrange, design these different arrangements and send them out to customers. Groundskeepers. We've had actually several students who have, after they've graduated from high school, gone on to successful careers in groundskeeping. We have one student in particular, Garrett AgApp, graduated a few years ago, and he has his own business now. And so it's something that can be very lucrative if this is something that you're interested in. One thing that I'm interested in, but I'm not terribly good at, is landscape architecture. I really like the idea of taking a piece of blank property and something that's just a house with nothing around it and designing things to make it look prettier. I really wish that I had more of a talent for that type of thing because it's something that I really enjoy, the design aspect of things. And then, of course, in North Carolina and in South Carolina, there is a tremendous amount of golf courses. And so being a golf course superintendent is always an option. And actually, NC State has one of the top programs in the country as far as golf course maintenance. And so if that's something that you're interested in, they have a great program. And I can find somebody that can help you if that's something that you're interested in possibly doing one day. Very needed and lucrative career. Some other ornamental horticultural careers. Somebody that's going to operate a nursery, and by nursery, I do not mean babies. I do not mean baby plants. A nursery, a plant nursery, is actually going to be where they grow trees and shrubs or sell trees and shrubs and other yard type of plants. A greenhouse manager is going to grow greenhouse types of plants, hanging baskets, bedding plants, things like that. Gardener is going to maintain for estates, landscapes, things like that, it's different types of institutions. And then a landscape contractor is going to be somebody that's going to help to install landscapes. And there's a lot of different certification types of exams that you can take if you are interested in doing landscape contracting. Lots of different courses that you can do at local community colleges. As far as fruit and vegetable careers, you're mostly looking at growers here, but that's not necessarily all. You have the person who's actually growing the vegetables or the fruits. If you go up into the Hendersonville area, you see these businesses where They have these apple orchards, and you can go and pick your own apples. Or it is very much a seasonal thing, but they typically make enough money off of that seasonal thing to sustain them throughout the year. So a lot of them don't just have the trees. A lot of them have shops and little niche markets. A produce manager would be somebody who works in a grocery store or even something like a farmer's market, maybe. And then you have things like wineries. When I was growing up, one of my eighth grade teachers actually was the owner of Duplin Winery, which was a very small operation at that point. And it was kind of something he did as a side job. He was a teacher, and he and his brother were starting a winery, and now Duplin Winery has become one of the largest ones that we have in the state. So, very, very lucrative job for him. Something that he got into as far as learning how to grow and raise grapes, which is actually called viticulture. Agronomy careers. Just some examples there. You're looking at things like an agronomist, which is somebody who is going to specialize in soils, and looking at crops. Maybe somebody that helps to grow and manage and cut and harvest hay. Maybe somebody that does grain inspection. Maybe somebody that just goes out and harvests crops. There are jobs like that where if you have the equipment, people will literally pay you to just come out and harvest their crops. And you just go from field to field harvesting whenever it's time for that. So those are some examples of agronomy or field crop type careers. Um, just some general plant science careers. You've got plant physiologists, which are those people who are going to study plant processes and functions. And by that, I mean things like photosynthesis, things like transpiration, where the plants are actually giving off water vapor. A plant breeder, somebody who is going to look at different types of plants and try to make them better. Doing crossbreeding of different types of plants, actually taking the pollen from the male part of one plant and actually cross-pollinating with the female part of another plant to come up with a new type of selection. A plant propagator is going to be somebody who reproduces plants, whether that's by seeds or by cuttings or by grafting. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go throughout this unit. And then an entomologist is going to be somebody who studies insects and the effect that they have on these different types of plants. So as we go throughout the course of this module, there'll be lots of things that you have an opportunity to learn about plants and how they work and how they operate, and that you may or may not be somebody that thinks you have a green thumb or be a plant person, but there's actually a lot that you can learn about growing plants and spending some time in a greenhouse, and we'll have an opportunity to do that for cohorts A and B. So next time we will be looking at some plant science tools, some tools that are used in the industry, and I will talk to you very soon.